So today I'm just going to talk about a couple of trials that we've been running, or give you the results of some of the trials that we've been running recently. There's a team of us here in WOG who have been working for a few years on means of increasing the number of lambs born, reproductive rate in ewes, and using nutrition as a means of doing that. So anyway. Oh, that's all right. So just in terms of background, we know that flushing increases ovulation rate in ewes, and that will primarily give you more twin lambs. It won't, depending on what your base rate of nutrition is and how long you've been feeding them for, you won't usually increase the number of ewes lambing, you will increase the number of twins born. Now that's good if you have effective lamb survival. Survival rate in twins is around 70 to 80%. Survival rate in singles is about 90%. So if you're going to flush ewes and get more twin lambs, you have to be in a situation where you're actually going to get adequate survival, that you're going to actually get a benefit out of it. You will maximise your benefit out of flushing by having high rates of survival. We also know that short-term flushing is more efficient than long-term flushing. Traditionally, flushing has been for, say, 6 weeks prior to joining, and then during joining. That actually takes quite a lot of feed resources, whether you're actually feeding them grain or just making them fatter on pasture. We know that short-term flushing for days 10 to 14 of the estrus cycle, the 17-day estrus cycle, or for 1 week prior to joining, actually works. So it's much more efficient. We also know that traditionally lupin grain has been used as the feed type to flush ewes with, but it's also possible to do it with just live pasture. It's got a high energy content and basically the energy, increase in energy, which is driving the response. So just some background to the trials that we are currently running. We ran a trial in 2012 looking at flushing ewes on lucerne. We had previously shown that flushing synchronised, estrus synchronised ewes worked. We wanted to show that you could do this in an on-farm situation with just naturally cycling ewes and using short-term flushing in that situation. So, does short-term flushing increase fetal numbers in unsynchronised ewes? What we did was had 4 different properties. We had on each property 2 replicates of each treatment, and we had ewes grazing lucerne or dead pasture for 7 days before joining started and for the first 7 days of joining. Now these were all joined in February, March, so autumn joining. This timing would not work for a spring joining, and we were working on the basis that about 65% of those ewes would actually get flushed with that grazing pattern. And this photograph is just to show you the sort of lucerne that we had. This was on one property. This was probably the property with the most lucerne. So we had heaps of lucerne. The result was that we got up to 21 extra fetuses per 100 ewes scanned. And if you have a look at the results here, we can see that on 2 properties, the property at Walbundry and the property at Mara, we had very good results. The average was about 18 extra fetuses per 100 ewes scanned. That's 18 extra lambs born. Remembering only they're nearly all extra twins, so that if you count that back to consider survival, what's that? About 15 extra actual lambs marked per 100 ewes joined. But you can also see that we had 2 properties where there's no difference between those grazing lucerne and those grazing dead pasture. One of the reasons why, or the reason why it didn't work very well on this Holbrook property was that the ewes weren't cycling when they were flushed. This Holbrook property had first cross ewes, all the other properties were merino ewes, and the Holbrook property were joined on the 8th of February. We had harnesses on the rams to see when they were mating or not. They weren't cycling, they just weren't mating, or not many of them. So if they're not cycling, they're not going to mate, they're not going to get pregnant, so it's not surprising that there's actually no response. The other factor that concerns the rock property was that other pastures, other live pastures, will probably give you a similar response to that as lucerne. It's a response to energy. So if you've got a pasture that's providing energy, it will depend on how much of each pasture, the quantity of each pasture present. So the dead pasture in this situation here actually had a lot of hairy panning, you would probably call it witchgrass, as well as native grasses. So there was a large quantity of other green live pasture. Same response. I'll point out that's not a significantly different response. It's statistically similar. So we thought, okay, well, we know it works. We can get a lot more lambs out of grazing on lucerne. Would we actually get more lambs if we actually made sure all ewes were flushed by actually grazing them on lucerne throughout joining? The issue with that is that does lucerne increase embryo mortality? Every time we've presented those results there, we have people say, yes, but you can't use on lucerne because it will cause embryo mortality. So and that's come from sheep producers, vets, other people in the sheep industry. It's quite a widespread concern. So just a bit of background information on why that might be the case. This here is I'm going to just show you the results of a trial that was done a long time ago actually. It was using estrus synchronised pen-fed ewes which were being fed a barley lucerne pellet. Okay? And it showed that feeding ewes at twice the energy maintenance requirement will produce embryo mortality, and also that they are particularly sensitive to low progesterone at days 11 and 12 of pregnancy. So what you can see in this table, if the energy level is maintenance, so they're maintaining live weight, the percentage of ewes pregnant is 68%. If the energy level is increased to twice maintenance requirement, we get a very large proportion of non-pregnant ewes. Okay, it's quite substantial. They then did some work which basically supplemented them with progesterone, and supplementing them with progesterone prevented that decline in pregnancy rate with the high feeding levels. So it's a cause effect. Low progesterone levels is one of the reasons you can have embryo mortality. What most people, the most common reason people give me for thinking that lucerne might be a problem is that we know that there is a problem with feeding excess nitrogen or protein that will cause embryo mortality. There's thousands of trials out there that show it. The issue is that it's far more likely to occur if sheep, other ruminants are on sub-maintenance energy levels. So particularly in high-producing dairy cows, this can be a problem. The question is the high protein content in lucerne a concern for sheep in a grazing situation? So anyway, we were fortunate enough to get some funding from Meat and Livestock Australia, and we've, over the last 2 years, conducted a trial to look at does the timing or the quantity of lucerne fed influence embryo mortality and fetuses scanned, because basically it's fetuses scanned which are important to you as farmers. And it's a combination of have you increased ovulation rate and a reduction in embryo mortality that results in the number of fetuses. So we used irrigated lucerne pasture. We had to guarantee we had good quality lucerne. So we harvested lucerne daily with a big mower to feed to them. We had about 200 ewes in the trial in each year, in 2 replicates of these 5 treatments. So where the day of artificial insemination is day 0, we had ewes fed control levels of pellets. So these were a fibre pellet, basically low protein, and just fed at an energy maintenance requirement. So they're going to maintain weight. To see whether it was some specific effect of lucerne. We also had lucerne fed at maintenance levels of energy. Then we had lucerne fed as much as they can eat, ad lib, post-insemination, or for only the first 7 days of after insemination. That's to see whether there is an effect of that day 11, 12 high energy levels. Is that the thing that drives it? Or we had lucerne fed for 7 days before insemination, as well as for the first 17 days after insemination, which basically replicates a flushing treatment. Right. So the results of the 2 years, and I'll run you through this line by line. There was no statistical difference in the proportion of ewes which got pregnant between the treatments. There's a lot of variation. It's a difficult trait to measure, and you need a lot of ewes to do it, and we would have liked to have a few more ewes. We got a very poor AI result this year. But statistically, there's no difference in the proportion of ewes pregnant. There's also no difference in the number of fetuses per ewe which were pregnancy scanned at approximately 60 days after insemination. If we look at the proportion of the ewes which were pregnant, which had multiple fetuses, we can see there is no difference between control ewes fed maintenance levels or ewes fed maintenance levels of lucerne. So it's not something specific to lucerne which is potentially an issue. If we then look at the ad lib treatments, we can see that feeding lucerne at ad lib levels for the first 17 days after AI actually reduced the proportion of ewes with multiples by about 50%. So it's having an adverse effect. There was no statistical difference if ewes were fed ad lib levels at different times. It would be nice if we had another years to do this trial and get some more numbers, because I would be suspicious that all these ad lib treatments might well cause a problem. But anyway, but at least from these results we know feeding high levels of lucerne to synchronised artificially inseminated ewes will reduce twinning rate. Okay, so it's a problem. Don't do it. What we then thought was, well, yep, great, we've got a good result there, but that's not actually what farmers do. Farmers don't normally synchronise their ewes and AI them. They normally have them in a grazing situation, not a pen-fed situation. So we thought we'd better just test this and just see what happens in a normal situation. So this year we had a grazing trial. We had 300 ewes. They were divided into 3 treatments and 2 replicates. So we had one group grazing dead pasture, grazing lucerne for 7 days before and for 7 days of joining, and lucerne for 7 days and throughout joining. This was done they were joined in March this year, so again it's an autumn joining. The thing to understand is, have you got enough lucerne to have an effect? Well, I reckon we did. This is a photograph of one of the lucerne paddocks at day 7 of joining. There's actually about 500 kilos of live lucerne pasture in that paddock. Because it rained every week during this trial, and by day 36 of joining, there was a couple of tonnes, so a fair bit of lucerne. To achieve the dead pasture paddock, so this was just a dead annual pasture, we wanted as much as possible, so we're not actually restricting the potential intake of the sheep. They got as much as they can eat basically, but it's dead pasture, it's poor quality. And we had to spray this out a couple of times during the year to keep it dead. So yeah, we've got a big difference in the nutrition that's supplied to the ewes. The results show that there was no difference in the proportion of ewes which actually got rattled, so were jumped on by a ram, to day 14 of joining. It's about 90%. No statistical difference. For the entire joining period, there is also no difference in the proportion of ewes which are not pregnant. So if there was a large number of ewes having embryo mortality, you would expect that there would be a difference in the proportion of dry ewes, and there wasn't. There was also no difference in the proportion of ewes which returned to service, so were rattled by a ram first and then didn't get pregnant and came back and got re-rattled again. There's no difference. What we did end up with was a large difference in the number of fetuses per ewe. So 1.3 in the dead pasture and 1.6 in the ones grazing lucerne, and there was no difference between grazing lucerne to day 7 or grazing lucerne throughout the trial. That was perhaps unexpected. I might have thought that there would be a greater number of fetuses. Those had more opportunity to be flushed, but there wasn't. I think that is because 90% got rattled in the first 14 days. So if you're already pregnant and you don't return to service, there's not much. You're pregnant. You can't be changed. Of those that returned to service or weren't mated, the numbers are so low that even if there was an effect, it's not going to have much difference. So basically, this indicates that there is not a problem with grazing lucerne, grazing high quantities of lucerne during joining. It does suggest that it might be more efficient use of feed to only graze them to day 7. You get most if not all of your benefit by doing that. In a situation where 90% of them get mated early on. If you had a problem with your ram fertility, if you didn't have enough rams, if your ewes weren't cycling, one might expect that leaving them on the lucerne longer would have a benefit, but not in this situation. So, in conclusion, in naturally cycling autumn joined ewes, grazing lucerne for 7 days before and during joining can increase the number of twin lambs born by quite a substantial amount if you've got the lucerne to do it. Where most ewes mate early during joining, grazing past day 7 of joining might not increase fetal numbers. And I would avoid feeding high energy to oestrogen synchronised AI ewes to minimise embryo mortality. And I don't mean just lucerne, I mean high energy. Thank you.
Oh, excellent, Susan. I'd like you all to join in. Thanks, Susan, for